Hey guys, this is John. This is round 4 of the Lone Wolf League on Chess, season 37. This is my first time participating in this league. And just to recap the format briefly before we get into the action, this is an 11-round tournament at a 30 plus 30 time control, 30 minutes with a 30-second increment. You play one game per week for 11 weeks. You know your pairing a few days in advance, usually, of the game, and you and your opponent just communicate. There's a Slack channel for the league. You communicate and you find a good time to play the game. So we are 3 games, 3 rounds into the season. And going into this week, I'm on 3 out of 3. I've won my first 3 games so far. And the field is narrowing at the top. So this is a Swiss-style tournament, meaning you get paired with players in the same score group as you. So you can see here on the standings, there are 4 players on 3 out of 3, including myself. So this is me. There's some rapid player on Tahazi 8 and also Happy Mode. And my pairing for this week is against Happy Mode. This player is rated 2349 classical on Chess. Good player. I didn't have as much time to prepare this week, so the prep session is abbreviated, but I hope you guys will find it interesting nonetheless. A little speed preparation session. Okay, that's all I'll say. Thank you guys so much for the feedback so far on these videos. A lot of chess to come. Enjoy this game against Happy Mode. Let's roll the tape. Okay, guys, this is my 5-minute prep. We're going to try to ascertain real quickly what Happy Mode does, what I'm likely to face in this game with the black pieces. So because this is pretty streamlined, I'm actually just going to quickly look at the games that Happy Mode has played in the league so far. So this is a game with black. Yeah, probably not too relevant. Certainly with just a few minutes to prepare. Okay, here's a game. So Happy Mode played with white against name goes in here. Knight f3, d5, g3. Okay, so very flexible line. Just a standard fianchetto. Played very quickly, too. Has some Catalan-esque type play there. Okay. And then 1 month ago, that was a game where Happy Mode played as black. So, interesting. Only 2 games. I wonder if Happy Mode got a bye. I think they probably did get a bye because this is round 4. Interesting. Okay, so let's narrow this down. Let's pull up the Chess database / opening explorer. We're going to take a look at Happy Mode as white. And let's try to get a feel for what Happy Mode does. Okay, so it definitely looks like a Knight f3, d4 player. All right, so seems to prefer the flexibility of Knight f3. I can relate to that. That's what I do as white too. So I usually play d5. I'm capable of playing other things. What happens if Happy Mode goes into a main line? Okay, plays e3 here. Doesn't play exchange, Slav or anything like that. Plays e3. Yeah, I could do this. I've played this many, many times. I usually play bishop e4 here. Let's see how this game went. There's a bunch of theory in this line, but I could definitely go for this as black. I'm not too concerned about playing the black side of a Slav. This is essentially a reverse London system, if you want to think about it that way. Okay. And with the Knight f3 move order, if we have Knight f3, d5, and then g3, usually I play bishop g4. So I'm just going to very quickly look at what Happy Mode does here. Yeah, Knight d7. Honestly, this is an ideal opponent for little preparation time because they play pretty flexibly, it looks like. And Happy Mode doesn't play anything that strikes me as hugely critical. What if c6 here? Because that kind of rules out the c4 line a little bit better. Just e6, castles. Yeah, and this is just a chess position. The German Grandmaster Georg Meyer is really good at this type of position, by the way. Yeah, d takes c4, knight f6. Looks like black's opponents have scored fine against Happy Mode. I mean, this is just chess. Yeah, this queen b3 thing, certainly a thing. D takes c4. Bishop takes f3 and knight e5. I think I've actually played the black side of this position before, believe it or not. Yeah. So I'm probably going to stick to the script, given how little time that I have to prepare. Putting myself in this situation, which is kind of fun in a way. Yeah, I'm probably going to stick to the script. And I wouldn't be surprised to see knight f3, g3. Looks like if we do get a d4 main line, it's likely to be that Slav line with e3. So I can put some twists on that or just play that in general if I need to. Okay, looks like a pretty solid player, though, and similar to my own play style. So I think we're going to see a strategic battle here, and we're about to find out. All right, let's play the game. Okay, and here we are. Let's tell Happy Mode good luck. Have fun. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this league so far. This is week 4. Limited prep, but we're looking to learn, and I'm kind of excited to see what unfolds in this game. I'm expecting knight f3. Yep, and Happy Mode does play knight f3. And I'll stick with my guns and play d5. Yeah, and Happy Mode seems to have a predilection for this g3 system. And as I was describing in my brief prep, I like to go bishop g4 here. That tends to be what I do. I played other things. I sometimes play the bishop to f5 in these situations, but I don't want to overthink. So let's just go bishop g4 as planned. Yeah, and here, knight d7, c6, both moves that I play. I'm going to go c6, be solid. And I'll be curious if Happy Mode goes for an early c4. I think there's a pretty good chance that they will. Plays h3 first. Okay. Let me take a sip of my tea. I've got the lemon ginger tea going again, guys, by the way. Oh, and let me fix my screen capture ever so slightly, because I do see I can make the board bigger. A little bit of troubleshooting in game. Yeah, that looks all right. So h3, questioning the bishop. Taking the knight is certainly an option here. With the position being so closed, I don't think it's a big concession to capture. Bishop h5, obviously a move as well. I'm trying to think if Happy Mode goes for c4 later, like bishop h5 and then a future c4, how much of a difference does the move h3 make? I generally don't mind playing with the knight pair in this situation. So the benefit of bishop takes f3 is that I just get to develop very quickly. I even rule out that c4 idea. So I'm kind of leaning towards doing that. I feel like that's going to be the simpler thing to do. And I'm pretty sure I've played that position before, actually. Just giving up the bishop pair. But bishop h5 is the more principled move. In fact, this reminds me of round 2, where I also played an early bishop g4. That time, my bishop was kind of floating out there, not hitting the knight. So yeah, taking her bishop h5. I'm not going to spend too much longer on this decision, but I'm just thinking right now how I want to shape this upcoming opening battle. Do I want it to be a little sharper with bishop h5, potentially allowing c4? Or should I just take on f3 and play chess? I think I'm going to take on f3 and play chess. And the pre-moved capture makes sense. Let's go knight d7 as planned. So with the pawn on c6 blunting the bishop, we've shut down in the short term any potential white has on that long diagonal. And by playing knight d7, I think we make it a lot less likely white's going to go for that c4 plan anytime soon, because I can capture the pawn, and then if queen c2, let's say, I can play knight to b6 and guard the pawn, or knight e5 to guard the pawn and even hit the bishop. Now, I know in this type of setup where there's a capture on f3, an exchange here, black often goes for h5, h4. So that's another thing I may consider. I might spice things up and throw h5 at Happy Mode. We'll see if Happy Mode commits their king in castling short. But this is potentially disruptive because I think if you're white, you don't necessarily want to allow h4 there. And then if you reply g4, the h2, b8 diagonal starts to look weak. But at the same time, if you play h4, then you have to worry about the g4 square. Maybe those knights can start latching onto that square in the middle game. Maybe there's even some sort of pawn break later. So I'm going to flirt with h5. I'm going to think about that move in the coming play. Oh, yeah. So in addition to the tea, I've got a little coffee left. I had a large coffee this morning from my local coffee shop. So I've got a little bit of that left. And I'm also rocking the water as well. So trying to stay fully hydrated here, folks. All right. So D3, flexible move. Yeah, that seems to be Happy Mode's MO. Their modus operandi. Staying flexible, not committing to C4, opening the dark square bishop. So if H5, I think bishop G5 would make sense as a counter. That's one way to discourage H4. Though then there's an argument, could I play F6 even in reply? Or perhaps queen B6 and hit this pawn on B2? So yeah, H5 looks interesting still, despite the bishop G5 move. Now, I could occupy the center with E5. I could get both pawns established on E5, D5. But I don't think I'm in a hurry to do that, because if I do get to play H5, H4, and white goes G4, I kind of like that H2, B8 diagonal is open. So that's one reason I'm leaning towards this H5 move. Could white go E4 and try to attack H5? I don't think that's a big deal. I think I just capture. Yeah, let's try it. Let's play pawn H5 and see how Happy Mode reacts. I'm sort of borrowing an idea that I'm aware of, but I don't know the concrete theory here if we're still in theory. So, however, I'm just checking my recording. If I look over this direction, it's always to check my recording. I only do that once or twice for video because, like I've described, I'm just paranoid that I'm going to start talking for 2 or 2.5 hours and not have clicked record. So yeah, as I was describing with this H5 idea, you have to be careful about this sort of thing. I wouldn't just want to play a random looking H-pawn move on the flank as black in the opening in a sharp position. Okay, you have to have an idea of what texture of position you're working with. The fact that this is a slower closed position, no pawns have been exchanged, that gives me more confidence to play a move like H5. Okay, and Happy Mode does play E4. Interesting. So I mentioned this move, but I didn't really believe it. So I could take on E4. That was my instinct. And it's looking like I'm going to achieve this H4 move if I want. I don't want to play it yet because then Happy Mode can take on D5. So I'm thinking take first and then play H4. Probably regardless of which way Happy Mode captures. If Happy Mode captures with the D pawn, knight E5 is sort of appealing, but for example, white could trade queens and play bishop E2. I don't necessarily want to trade queens, especially if I think I can inflict some weaknesses on white. I'd rather toy with the landscape on the king side a little bit more, if that makes sense, before I commit to trading queens. Because I feel like I'm very solid still. Now, on pawn takes E4, bishop takes H5, am I really concerned? I don't think so. I can take on D3, and white can't take with the queen because I take their bishop. I could also play knight G to F6. Looks completely fine. So, yeah, I think take on E4. And I wonder if Happy Mode's going to take with the bishop. But it's not my decision, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to play this move, so let's do it. Oh, I see another problem with bishop takes H5. Actually, a huge problem. Queen A5 check. That wins the game for me. So if this video is only 15, 20 minutes long, and you're watching this right now, then that's probably what happened. Bishop takes H5, Queen A5 check. But I don't think Happy Mode's going to play that. It looks like a very loose move. It blunders the game away instantly. That's funny. Yeah, Queen A5 was not on my radar because conceptualizing this position, that's a very long range operation, right? And I also just had a pawn on D5, so pawns tend to be firm barriers if there's a structural thing going on, like a mini structure like B7, C6, D5, we tend to fix that in our heads, where sometimes it's inconceivable that the structure can change so quickly and lines can open like that. So although bishop takes h5 would give me a quick win, I hope it doesn't happen because this game can be a lot more interesting. All right, time management wise, looking fine. We're 7 moves into the game. I think I'm actually playing a little quicker than I did in the past couple games. And I'm happy. I often use this word happy, or, if my prep didn't go so well, the position out of the opening wasn't to my liking, I might express differently. But, you like to check in at certain times in the opening. Happy mode takes with the bishop. And just ask yourself, like, how am I feeling about uh, my prep, what I've achieved so far, what's going on, big picture. So it takes with the bishop, super solid. And I think h4 is going to be consistent here. I'm trying to create some weaknesses in the white position. Get white to play h4. Maybe this pawn overextension will be a theme, as we've seen in at least one prior game. My game from round 2, I think, against, who is that, Gone Nowhere. But maybe white will succeed in stabilizing the position. I don't know. I just like the look of this h2 b8 diagonal being open. So I think h4 is going to be the move. I could start with knight f6 and attack the bishop. I'm pretty sure happy mode would want to keep their light square bishop. But h4 looks more flexible, frankly. So I'm going to play it. And look how nice it is that I have this pawn on c6. This mini chain, the pawn on c6, the pawn on b7, blocking that light square bishop. So useful in shutting down a fianchettoed enemy bishop. Because remember, when an enemy bishop occupies the fianchetto diagonal, that's the longest diagonal for that piece on the board. And it's nice if you can establish 2 pawns, maybe even 3 pawns, and create a wall. It's a very well-known device. I use it a lot, specifically against this light square bishop. I play a lot of systems where I put pawns on c6, d5, b7. Okay. Yeah, it's been a bit of a hectic morning for me, and hence the limited prep. Part of me wanted to, just take on the challenge of prepping for one of these games with very limited time, because that's a thing in competitive chess. Those of you who have played over the board tournaments before, especially if you're in the US and you played over the board tournaments, very frequently you will not know the pairings or have very little time to prepare prior to the game. So you got to be willing to think on your feet and make snap calls about what your opponent's play style is, what they might be comfortable, uncomfortable with, and just do your best about trying to predict how the game may go. Okay, so g4 is played. Yeah, that's expected because I was looking to damage white's structure, and white clearly didn't want to take on h4. So, yeah, I'm thinking e6 here. Maybe there's an argument to be made for e5 to help control the f4 square, but e6 seems to fit the position better. I get to continue building pawns on light squares. I can play bishop d6 in the near future. Be very curious if happy mode ends up castling kingside, or if he tries to pivot and go queenside. That would be unusual for this kingside fianchetto stuff, but could happen. I think I do like e6 better than e5. e5 leaves this light square diagonal open. I take a little more space with e5. So that is somewhat compelling, but I block my pieces, so I'm not sure how much I like that. Yeah, I could see this developing in somewhat Scandinavian-like fashion, actually. e6, knight c3. You know, another way to treat this position is to play g6 and go for the dark square fianchetto. Create a fianchetto of my own. Maybe I leave the pawn on e7 in that case. I think if I pursue that plan, white is more likely to castle short, though. I think they're more likely to castle short, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. My bishop would occupy a good diagonal with g6, bishop g7. Yeah, a couple different options here. These three moves. There's still knight f6, but I think I want to keep knight f6 in reserve. Maybe there's some situations where I want my knight coming to e7, actually. Yeah, g6 has some appeal. If I want to couple it with e5 later, I would be blocking the diagonal potentially towards my king if I end up castling short. Let's just say g6, white does castle short, bishop g7, I don't know, knight c3, knight f6. If I castle short, there's some question if my pawn on h4 is a weakness. It very well could be. So I didn't really talk about my own king, but I'm going to wait and see where white goes. I think on the balance, I'm still leaning towards e6, so I'm going to go for it. I don't think I'm going to achieve more clarity with spending an additional minute or two, so let's play the standard move here, e6. I could still, in theory, play g6 if I want to switch it up, but I do like the idea of menacing bishop d6 at least. And again, this is consistent with playing against this light square bishop. I don't have a light square bishop. I exchanged it early on. So the more pawns I can erect on light squares that are protected, the more I'm going to keep out my opponent's bishop. Keep that piece at bay. If you're curious, we're playing this game local time 12:30 p.m. for me, so early afternoon. And I think happy mode's in Europe, so I think it's early evening for happy mode. That's another really nice thing about this league, guys. It's an international league. I've already faced players from multiple parts of the world, multiple continents. That's one great thing about chess, too, overall. It's just how international this game is. It blows me away every time. So the main features of this position so far are the exchange that I made for the bishop for the knight on f3. So white has the bishop pair. And also this h-pawn rush that I made. And the jury's still out on the h-pawn rush, who that's benefited. I like to think it's benefited me because in white pushing g4, as I've said already a couple times, white has weakened this h2 b8 diagonal. Does that offset the bishop pair? And does the bishop pair matter much? That remains to be seen. If I were to bet, I think the engine probably slightly prefers white in this position, but that's not out of the ordinary. That's not a surprising evaluation to me. But who knows? Maybe the engine will say this is equal. And I'm really curious which side of the board white's going to castle on. Very, very curious about that, because that's going to impact where I put my own king. I don't think I'm going to be able to castle quicker than white can castle. So expect me to try to play some developing moves and linger a little bit, if you will, with my king in the center, waiting to see where white goes. And I might go the same side. I might go opposite side. It's really up in the air. I can see the spectator list. When you play on Lichess, it shows you the spectator list in the bottom corner. My webcam is actually blocking it. And I see one of my opponents. Shout out to Terror MT from round 1. Terror MT is actually watching this game. Yeah, and cheers to everyone in these leagues. If you have decided to play, my kudos to you, because this is not a simple time commitment to play the entirety of this league, or even 8, 9 games out of the 11. So I really give anyone credit who steps into the arena here. Okay, knight c3 played, as somewhat expected. So bishop d6, that's the move that I'm definitely looking at. I don't think switching it up and trying to go for the fianchetto makes a lot of sense, now that I think about it more, because really the only reason to play g6 is if I want to get f5 in later as leverage. And that could be a valid reason, but I think bishop d6 is just a more useful move in the short term. And it'll probably give me a lot more to work with if white castles short, which white very well may do. There are some cases where I could try to create a queen-bishop battery towards that h2 square. And even if white plays f4, that's starting to get dicey for white with their king safety. So I think bishop d6 here. Now, another reason I'm liking bishop d6 is that white's knight can't easily jump to e4 or b5 and attack that piece. So let's go ahead and play it. White could move the light square bishop and then work up to knight e4. But by then, maybe I have played knight f6. Maybe I played queen c7 to try to go bishop f4. I wouldn't mind a trade of the dark square bishops. I'd love to keep a grip on this f4 square. That's a square that often proves to be pretty useful when white has played g4. Useful for black, that is. So let's see what white does. Yeah, I think if I were playing white, I would lean towards queen e2, bishop d2, castling long, some plan like that. I think white's going to be hesitant to castle short with their king side being porous. The only thing is, let's say queen e2 is played. And let's say I respond with queen c7. Bishop d2, bishop f4, I think is already looking strategically nice for black. Not an edge even, but I just like knowing that I can trade off those dark square bishops. Maybe I'll send the knight to e7. If I can hinder white playing f4 later, I'm going to be pretty happy about that. So I do think with bishop d6 having been played, white has to consider queen c7, bishop f4. Maybe white will put the queen on f3 for that reason, but that makes the light square bishop a little bit awkward. I could potentially even go after it. I could potentially play knight e5 under some circumstances. White could think about playing d4, advancing in the center. Plays bishop e3. Okay. So the first thing that catches my eye against bishop e3, which is also a normal looking move, is if I play knight f6 and the light square bishop moves, maybe knight d5 starts to make some sense to go after the knight and the bishop. Probably not. I think white can take with the knight, and then maybe c4 is back on the table. So maybe that's overrated, but I'm going to keep a knight coming to d5 in mind, because I might want to try to attack two white minor pieces in that way. So queen c7, that's still a top candidate move for me here, because I like the look of this bishop f4 move under almost every circumstance. Now, white's bishops are both pointed towards my queen side. They're also pointed towards the king side, but white has their bishops arrayed nicely in the center. So castling queen side, if I do play queen c7, that might not be something I do in the short term, although I probably don't have to fear bishop takes a7 because their bishop gets trapped. So maybe I'll consider it. I'm also seeing I can consider playing the other knight to f6 if I want to keep the bishop on d6 defended, but I don't think I should allow knight takes d5 so early. So leaning towards queen c7 still. I could play queen f6, by the way, to try to go bishop f4, but I don't like white moving the knight and getting knight e4 in. So let's go queen c7. Keep the queen back. Structurally, I feel at home because this resembles a Scandinavian, my favorite opening, which hopefully I'll get at least once in this league. So yeah, a lot of times in the Scandinavian, you do end up trading your light square bishop for the white knight on f3. And white quickly plays queen d2, so blocks the bishop f4 move, prepares castling queenside. Makes sense. Makes sense. It looks like white is clogging their pieces in the center a bit. But do I have anything actionable against that? I don't know. I don't know. One thing I'm noticing, though, thinking if I could get f5 in under some circumstances, like knight e7, try to go f5 and then f4. Probably doesn't quite win material, although maybe. If I play knight e7, is f5 a threat? Let's say knight e7, castles queenside, f5. Take. Bishop f3, f4, bishop d4 hits the pawn on g7. It's probably not a threat yet, but I do think white's going to have to start thinking about it. So maybe knight e7 makes sense here as opposed to knight f6, which also makes sense. But I think on knight f6, white's probably just going to retreat their bishop to g2 or f3. I don't know if I'm thrilled by the knight d5 prospect, even though initially I said I was. And unless I think knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, I can maybe somehow attack down the c file, but white hasn't committed their king yet. And if I castle queenside, even if white can't play bishop takes a7 due to b6, I just don't like that I'm showing my hand, and white might decide to go short. So knight e7 is a handy looking move. I can still go to d5, but I kind of like working up to that f5 move under a lot of cases too. So what if knight e7, white voluntarily moves their bishop back? Voluntarily plays bishop g2. I think that's fairly likely, actually. Do I maybe play the other knight to f6 to guard e4? Because that frees up the e4 square for white. That would be interesting. Put that knight to work. Maybe get both knights pointed at d5. That would be very interesting. Because white would love to hop the knight into e4 and attack my dark square bishop. So that's why I'm mentioning this. Yeah, I'm going to go knight e7. Let's play it. It seems more flexible than playing knight f6, which is the obvious move. But if I play the knight to f6, I can't threaten f5. So as far as I can tell, knight e7 gives me more options because I can still go to d5. There's nothing I can't do with knight g8 to e7 that I couldn't do with knight f6 or could do with knight f6. So it looks more flexible to me. So we're getting to the point where both sides have made logical developing moves. It's looking like someone's going to decide where to castle pretty soon. Maybe we'll both try to delay that decision. But there's some feeling out here going on. Who's going to blink first, so to speak, and decide where to put their king? Under normal circumstances, if my pawn were back on h7, I would for sure consider castling short, even though white's thrown a few of their pawns up the board, because I look very solid on the king side if I have my pawn back on h7. It's not easy for white to make contact with my position. So it would take white many moves to get at me there. But with my pawn all the way advanced to h4, castling short is riskier because I might just end up losing that pawn. Bishop g5 takes h4 under a lot of circumstances. That could be time consuming for white, too time consuming, because maybe I get in bishop f4 somewhere the moment white takes the pawn. But as a general consideration, that's one thing that's going to give me pause about castling short. Not so much the bishop's pointed towards my king side. That's fine, as long as there's no Greek gift sacrifice or something. But that pawn being on h4, yeah, not the most normal circumstance where you end up castling short. All right, I finished off my coffee. Made sure to prioritize the coffee. It was my top candidate drink, which I just finished. Get the caffeine fully going through you, and then you can taper off. Now I go to the herbal tea. Supplement water as needed. Got to consider your candidate moves when it comes to beverage selection in a long game. Almost as important as your actual moves. Yeah, so I don't know. If I were playing white, again, I think castling queenside is the obvious thing to do, and it makes sense. White's been developing in a way that suggests that they are going to castle queenside. But I'm looking at this diagonal towards the king, the c1, h6 diagonal. I'm looking at f5 if I'm white, which I think white's going to notice that f5 could be a theme. So there's some things that give me pause here. I got to make sure that dark square bishop doesn't get trapped after f5, f4. It doesn't appear to. Because the annoying thing for me, let's say white castles long, and I play f5. Let's say there's a trade on f5, bishop f3, or bishop g2, whatever. Let's say bishop f3. If I advance f4, white plays bishop d4. I would love to be able to play bishop f4 and skewer the queen of the king, but my pawn is occupying that square. Okay, so happy mode continues playing flexibly, plays bishop g2. I mentioned this move, and I thought knight f6 might be a good reply to that. Point both knights at that d5 square. That's the move that caught my eye. And I continue to play the waiting game with that move. It must be noted. I could also play knight d5 right away. So that is also a consideration. The only thing is on knight takes d5, I'm not sure I like taking if I don't know where white's king is going to go yet. Because like I said, if white takes and I take with my c-pawn, I think c4 is going to be back on the agenda pretty soon. And I think white's going to feel more comfortable castling short when a pair of knights have been traded. That's why I'm leaning towards knight f6 here. Probably with the intention of getting that knight to d5, maybe the other knight. But I think it's going to give me some nice flexibility, and maybe knight e7, maybe this knight can go to g6 later. Which is also a thing, by the way. I could consider knight g6 now, given that there's no bishop takes g6 anymore for white. Yeah, if I want to lock in on that f4 square, maybe that's the thing to do. So I think these are my two candidate moves, knight f6 and knight g6. Knight g6 absolutely gets a grip on that f4 square. Suppose white can play knight e2 if they want. Then it might be nice to have knight d5 in the hopper. I'm still leaning towards knight f6 and keep knight g6 in reserve. Again, just in the interest of playing flexibly. Seems to make a little more sense. But I'm intrigued by both knight moves. Intrigued by both. So if knight f6, let's just say white castles long. Do I play knight d5 at that point? And on knight takes d5, probably I just take with the knight then and attack the dark square bishop again. That looks nice. Yeah, I have the option of c takes, but I can also just take with the knight if I want. Yeah, let's go knight f6. Let's play this one. And I'm not that worried about bishop g5 because I do have my rook helping to defend this pawn on h4. And also with knight g6, I could even get another defender on the h pawn if needed. Lots of shadow boxing going here. This is sometimes how it goes down when you play a flexible opening like this. This kingside fianchetto. And I played pretty flexibly in reply. I established a pawn in the center. But then, aside from that exchange, I more or less tried to keep my options open. h5, h4 was a bit committal, but nothing too crazy. You got to expect h-pawn pushes in modern chess these days. And I think I explained my reasoning for that. I'm trying to create weaknesses. And we do have some traction on that long diagonal, h2, b8. Yeah, interesting battle shaping up here. Many directions this game could still go. We're not even halfway through it, at least on the clock yet. I would be surprised if white continues to defer castling, because I'm just not seeing too many moves white could conceivably think about or want to play aside from castling in one direction or the other. And I would bet white's going to castle long. I think they're going to weigh the risks of castling short, and just visually, it just doesn't look right. I get this knight g6 move towards f4. I think you only castle short if you're really confident you can get f4 in, which, by the way, I should point out, white could consider f4 here, couldn't they? I didn't really think about that because knight f6 to d5 hits both these points pretty hard. Yeah, that's probably not great for white, but they could think about it if they're intent on getting this pawn off of f2. Maybe white would consider d4, but I don't think d4 is even helpful for white anymore. It takes space in the center, but it blocks that dark square bishop towards a7. So I think white's going to want to keep the scope of this bishop open, fully open in both directions. Especially if I were to castle queenside. White's going to miss not having bishop takes a7, at least as an idea in some circumstances. So I predict castling long here for white. Maybe white could defer with something like a3, some useful looking move. But even a3, if white later castles long, maybe that gives me a hook to consider castling short and trying to blow this baby up with b5, b4. So those are all things white has to weigh. I mean, b3 doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. Maybe bishop b4 right away isn't even good there, but just doesn't quite look right. So if we're ruling out a lot of these pawn moves for white, what is there really left? Are they going to make another minor piece move? Probably not. Queen move doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay. And I'm actually up on the clock now. That's nice to see. I was trailing in the first part of this game. Still close, but I'll take it. So I'm spending my time right now thinking if white castles long, what I'm going to do. Either knight f6 to d5, or maybe castle long myself. Yeah, and white does castle long. So knight f6 to d5, that's my main candidate move. And if white takes, I'm really unsure. I think I could make an argument for knight takes and c takes. I know at a minimum knight takes makes sense. So that would probably be my default move, to go after that dark square bishop, which is sort of pegged to e3 because bishop d4 allows bishop f4. Okay, white can come back at that point, but that's not what you want to do. So yeah, knight f6 to d5. What if white plays knight e4? I could play bishop f4, I suppose. Don't even have to take the bishop on e3 right away. Yeah, that looks annoying. c4. Then I take with the knight, pawn takes. Maybe my bishop is a little wonky there. But I'm still leaning towards knight f6, d5. Could play the other knight to d5, as I've described. But knight f6 to d5 just seems better to me. But can I articulate why? It's a big benefit of these games for me, even though I spent a lot of time explaining my thought process. Actually having to articulate it on camera to you guys helps clarify a lot of things to me. So even if this move appeals to me for some reason, can I actually describe why knight e7 to d5 wouldn't be better? Because one big benefit of knight e7 to d5 is that on knight e4, I can actually take that knight and then take on e3. So I can get some favorable exchanges in. Knight e7 to d5 takes away f5 stuff in the future. But does that really even matter much? I don't know. On both moves, by the way, bishop b4 could start to become a consideration. So that's another little twist. Yeah, so I'm starting to think on knight f6 to d5, knight e4 might be a decent reply. Even if I play bishop f4 or knight takes e3, I don't know. Somehow I think that makes matters a little too easy for white. So I kind of like controlling the e4 square longer. And if there's a trade, so be it. I'll probably take with the knight. Could take with a c pawn, but I think then king b1 and white still might work up to c4. So I think I like taking with the knight better. Could castle long, but I think it's time to clamp the f4 square. Yeah. Let's play knight e7 to d5. I talked myself into it. Gave back some time there. But this could see a transformation of the position with multiple exchanges. So probably not a bad use of time for me. And white takes. So this is where I thought knight f6 takes d5. You know, maybe with knight e7, one consideration was taking with the e pawn in this position, although that would allow f4 potentially. So I don't know. But okay, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I'm not keen to play c takes d5 because I think after king b1, white's king looks very safe. I think knight takes d5 is the move. Yeah, I'm not going to take with the pawn, so let's take with the knight. So I think at this point, I've guaranteed that I can win one of the bishops for my knight. Because how does white prevent knight takes e3 without allowing bishop f4? It's pretty much impossible, nor would it be in white's best interest. So to me, the question is, can I derive some benefit from this? And also still, where should I put my king? I think the game is still very much close to equal. I think I've done a pretty good job of neutralizing white's bishop pair in any perceived edge that white might have with that, but I'm under no illusions here that this is anything spectacular for me. It just looks fairly normal still. But there's a few things to think about. If you're white, like which bishop do you want to give up? I think they're going to want to give up their dark square bishop. Maybe even take with the e-pawn. Maybe they'll even try to force that with c4. But by the way, I mean, I might play knight f4 in some cases too, right? I could play knight f4. I could think about bishop f4 sometimes as well. So I still like the flexibility that I have in terms of the tension and whether to trade and how to trade. Will the h-pawn be a strength or a weakness as pieces come off the board? Too early to say. A pawn like this can be very useful in the endgame, being so close to promotion. But it could also be loose if I take my eye off it. And maybe this bishop sticks around and bishop g5, bishop takes h4 comes in somewhere. Very unlikely that ever works for white. But I got to keep my eye on it. If white takes the knight, bishop takes d5. I probably will take with the c-pawn at that point. And if king b1, looking for c4, maybe I'll go b5. Maybe pawn b5 to clamp this square. And then I'm looking at castling short later. I think castling short would make sense, despite the pawn on h4. One thing with all these trades happening, if I do castle short later, there are fewer pieces white has available that they could throw at me. Oh, and white does take the knight. Interesting. I wasn't expecting that move. So interesting that Happy Mode decides to play it. Even though I was just talking about it, I didn't think white would do that. So does he really want to get f4 in? Maybe. I'm probably going to take with the c-pawn. I'm just thinking if there's any rationale for taking with the e-pawn. Not really seeing why I would. I think c takes. Keep the e-file protected. It's not even so much my king. I think that c-file could be useful for me. In theory, I think the c-file should be more useful for me than it is for white down the road. Yeah, let's take with the c-pawn. Okay, so no more bishop pair for white. And I exchange that fianchettoed kingside bishop. So I'm starting to feel like my position is a little more comfortable. I don't know if I'm better yet. Maybe talk of even better is overblown, period. Maybe the position is just equal. But I don't know. I don't quite identify with what white did these last few moves, especially this last move, bishop takes d5. Seems a bit of like kind of a limp decision, you know, like I don't see much of a follow-up to this for having given up the bishop pair. Okay, so yeah, clearly Happy Mode wanted f4. Now, first thing we look at against this move is d4. Bishop takes d4, bishop takes f4. Then there's bishop e3. That would just be a big old trade. Could go for that and play rook c8 at the end and threaten checkmate. But by no means do I have to rush that. But that is absolutely the first thing that we look at here. I could castle short and try to put a rook on c8. I could put a rook on c8 immediately. I could even castle long in this position. Could even castle long. So lots of options. Yeah, so this must have been why Happy Mode did this. I think they were pretty fixated on getting f4 in. And jury's out as to whether that's good or not. I can't really say, nor does it make sense to speculate too much, I think. Castling short sort of feels like the move here. I'm just weighing how comfortable I am weakening that h-pawn and potentially allowing the queenside pawns to march at me. Kind of feels like the move, though. I don't think I should worry too much about the h-pawn. Even if white wins it, it's going to be time-consuming. f4 is loose, too. d4, I just don't know that I want to simplify this much. without a strong reason. I think I'd rather keep my dark square bishop on board and be able to threaten stuff like d4 later. Maybe that's the dynamic of me being the higher rated player. I just want to keep more tension in the position. More potential ways to trip my opponent up. I could perhaps argue that my king is just purely safer than white's king, though, if I do castle short. h4 is still weak. I don't think white's going to have a huge task to defend their king. So, yeah, I'm leaning towards keeping the dark square bishops on board. Rook c8 does threaten d4, but I can't assume white's going to blunder that. Can't assume white's going to blunder some tactic towards c2 later. So I'm thinking castle short. I don't know about castling long. My king's a little open. I can probably tuck it with king b8. But I want the double-edged position if I castle short. I want to be able to create some problems towards that white king. So let's say I do that. White plays king b1. Maybe I play rook f to c8. And then rook c1, let's say. How do I continue from there? Do I just start pushing my queenside pawns? And say, hey, you're going to have a hard time getting at my king. White does have f5, though. f5 is a move I have to consider, huh? Castle short, king b1. Because I think it makes sense for white to tuck their king away. Spend a couple moves doing that. I suppose I can always play d4 later if I want. I could work up to that. But then there's no guarantee that I get a bishop trade out of that. If I postpone that decision. Okay, spending a little time here. Yeah, if I castle short, f5 is slightly annoying. It's hard to tell how much of that is a real issue towards my king and how much of it is just generally trying to open lines. Maybe the f-pawn could be weak after a trade, but it does open the g-file. Could push e5 to try to go d4. Hard to say. So I'm kind of coming off of castle's king side now. Maybe towards the d4 simplifying move. Just hate to simplify the position like that. But it might be warranted. It does remove the f-pawn as a future consideration. I mean, rook c8 also makes a lot of sense if I want to do that. I'm not at all worried about bishop takes a7. So I could play rook c8 and just see how white responds. It does threaten d4. So that's a nice aspect to that move. I can't castle short anymore, though, or long anymore. That's the downside for me. Also, if I want to play rook fc8 later, I can't do that. So there's some trade-offs here. If I play d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes f4, bishop e3, trade. Castle short. As long as this move queen g5 looks a little irritating. I know I can play queen d8 if I need to defend the pawn, but we trade, we get to some double rook ending. That's probably even. Both sides have potential pass pawns there. I don't know. This might be a position where I should just suck it up and play d4 and be okay with all these simplifications. But I'm really torn because I don't want to make the game so easy to play for white. So rook c8, castle short, d4, those are all candidate moves. Leaning towards rook c8. I'm spending a lot of time here, by the way, getting down on the clock. But maybe rook c8 helps clarify things, and it does threaten d4. Let's play it. I can't justify too much further time, so let's go rook c8. Now, this threatens d4. So if I get another move, I play d4, bishop takes d4, bishop takes f4, and white can't play bishop e3. Well, they might have to, but bishop e3 is going to lose to bishop takes e3. And if white takes with the queen, I mate on c2. Okay, so that's the rationale behind this move. Maybe there's some bishop b4 shenanigans I can throw in with this too. That's perhaps not out of the question. But also white might play rook f1 now to defend the pawn. I missed that move. Probably not too big of a deal, but they could consider it. Yeah, rook h to f1 would make sense. I don't know, though. Then bishop b4 could be irritating. Bishop b4. I don't know if white wants to commit to c3. Perhaps they don't mind and just go for it, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I might be reaching with rook c8, and maybe d4 was just objectively the best move there. But I think it's going to give white something to think about. This d4 idea. Remains to be seen if castle short is good for me. Maybe I should keep my king in the center a little bit longer, but that's hard to do with the coordination stuff. Yeah, I think rook hf1 is probably a good move here for white. It diffuses the d4 stuff. I don't think I have anything there, do I? Take with the bishop, there's rook takes, e5. Nah, that doesn't work. So rook hf1, at least then white can't get both rooks towards the king side very easily. But my fear would be that on castles, it gives white a reason to play f5. That's the downside of what I'm doing. Maybe then I play e5, but f6, starts to look a little scary towards my own king. Maybe there's really nothing there. e5, take on g7, I sack a pawn. I have a lot of activity there. I don't know, though. Looks... Let's let white figure it out for now. On rook hf1, I might have to castle short anyways, just to coordinate and deal with f5 as best I can. Maybe I take the pawn even. But then rook takes, hits the pawn on d5. Probably don't lose that pawn straight up, but it starts to look a little shaky. There's also this bishop b4 thing I was mentioning I can throw in somewhere. But I think on bishop b4, white might be okay with just c3. So white plays king b1. So do I take my opportunity to play d4 again? Now I don't know. I don't know that it makes as much sense. So maybe I start to just think about castling short and then dealing with the f5 plan. Maybe that's the play. Castle short, f5. Maybe I just take and play rook e8 and target that bishop. Target that bishop on d4. Yeah, maybe opening the e-file isn't so bad. I feel like I'm probably going to have to castle short regardless. Pretty soon. Yeah, let's do it. And I don't want to waste too much more time. I might be castling into a pawn storm here. That just might be the case, but we're going to find out. And then I'm hoping that on f5, pawn takes f5, pawn takes f5, rook fe8. Maybe rook takes e3 could be a threat in some cases. I think my counterplay in the middle is going to be compelling. We both have isolated pawns, by the way, if white does that. White would have an isolated f pawn. I've got my isolated d pawn. So it could get dynamic. maybe if white goes rook hf1 now, rook e8 makes sense as a prophylactic move, preparing to meet f5 with the capture. Because then if rook takes, I think rook takes e3 is just winning for me. They take on c2 at the end, and white's d-pawn falls, and it's checkmate. So this might be a nice little waiting move, semi-waiting move if I get the chance. Still very interesting here. We've got some spice in the position. I'm still thinking about the d4 move, honestly, from the first moment that I could have played it after f4. So I'm trying to tear myself away from that. It's one of my bad habits in chess. I think I have more of the scientist type archetype in chess as a chess player, that is. Botvinnik talks about this, and he was a scientist himself, literally and on the chessboard. I think he was a mechanical engineer by trade. And I just want to know the truth in position. So I'm naturally curious if d4 was the best move there, as I was describing. Like maybe it just was the move to play, even though it led to simplifications. But I also know that I have to play the position in front of me here, and nothing's going to rewind the position for me to think about that more. So I can't waste too much time on it. And speaking of time, we're back to even. That's good to see. I feel like this game has gone by fast. Maybe because my prep was shortened, but I've been fully engaged in this one. This is a good player, I can tell. Makes good decisions. I was a little skeptical of some of those middle game decisions. Bishop takes d5 in particular, but you know, this has been nothing crazy, and these might actually just be good decisions. Who knows? So I think Happy Mode's going to be looking at pushing f5 in some way. So does white want to prepare it with rook to f1? Does white want to just YOLO it, push it right away? But I'm really seeing my f rook coming to e8 being useful in a lot of cases. Pretty sure I want to keep my a8 rook, or my c rook rather, on the c file to pressure c2. But the kingside rook coming to e8 makes a lot of sense in many of these lines. Okay, and Happy Mode going into the tank here. I wonder if Happy Mode decides to open the position somehow, if I'm going to have a good opportunity in the next several moves to maybe put Happy Mode in time pressure. Try to make this dynamic and, yeah, pick him off somehow in some complicated position. Plays f5 immediately. Yeah, so that came to mind. So I think take, rook e8. And I think, at least this is the argument I'm going with in my head, I'm okay with opening the position because I like the pressure I have on the bishop. I also like that I can throw in bishop g3 if I need to. I feel like with bishop e5, bishop f8, f6, I shouldn't collapse on g7. So, yeah, I'm going to take. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I want to keep this time edge. I don't think e5 made a lot of sense. Maybe rook e8, but it doesn't seem right to give white much of a choice after f5. I think I should clarify the structure. So opening my king a little bit for sure if white takes with the g-pawn. But this rook is coming to the newly opened file, and white's queen is starting to look slightly overloaded. I mentioned the bishop b4 move. Even if after g takes f5, rook e8, rook takes e3 isn't a crushing threat, because I think white can hide in the corner, and unless I can get at b2, I'm not immediately winning or anything. It's still going to be potentially dangerous for white, and they're going to be burning time thinking about this stuff. And maybe there will be something for me that crops up. I think g takes f5, rook f e8, bishop d4 is fairly likely. in which case I was thinking bishop e5, trying to trade that bishop, and then bishop takes e5, queen takes e5 maybe, go after the pawn on f5. In my head, a few moves back, I saw queen g5 at that point, since white no longer has to defend c2. And I wasn't sure how that would shake out. Maybe I could play queen e2. There's rook c1, I suppose. Maybe white's holding everything there. I do have to watch f6, to be fair. So I do think g takes f5, rook e8, bishop d4 makes sense. There's bishop f4 I can throw in at various points. Bishop's pretty annoying on d4, though. That's why I'm thinking I might have to eliminate it. Maybe I take with the rook on e5. If I want to keep my queen poised, maybe that's actually just a better decision. There's f6. I can play g6. Is white's f-pawn a strength or a weakness? Maybe queen h6 just wins there, actually. Ooh, and white goes rook f1. Whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What is this? Does not take. I am very surprised by that. So white wants to play a pure sacrifice, pawn sacrifice, but if I take g4, pawn takes g4, bishop g3, and I say, hey, I want to defend that pawn. Okay, happy mode can go bishop g5, I suppose. Maybe that's what they're intending. Ooh, this looks shaky, though. There's also f4 as a move I can consider. Something about this looks shaky for white. But I guess I see the idea. They want that pressure on h4 at the end. I don't know, though. I don't know if I buy this. But it doesn't really matter if I buy it or not. I got to come up with something good against it. So it seems like they're having a little buyer's remorse and they want to take with the rook on f5. Could play rook e8 to start. Rook takes f5. I don't think rook takes e3 is working for me there, though, is the thing. Rook e3, queen takes c2, king a1. There's no back rank checkmate that I see. So taking on g4 is an option. Rook f e8 is an option. What else? Bishop b4 doesn't quite work either. d4 maybe under some circumstances. Actually, d4, bishop takes d4, f4 could be a thing. On d4, maybe white plays bishop g5, though. Okay, let's get back to f takes g4, because this is critical. F takes g4, h takes g4, bishop g3. That was my first instinct. But I think bishop g5 is what I'm not liking there. Bishop g5. It's a little clumsy. It takes a few moves for white to get the pawn back, but I don't see a good way to prevent that. Could play bishop e7 instead, but still looks like white's going to win that pawn back sooner or later. So d4, bishop takes d4, f4. That looks intriguing. Create a protected passed pawn. It's doubled, but it is protected passed. Okay, now I'm down on the clock, so let's try to narrow this down in a hurry. Rook f e8, rook takes f5. Just not seeing anything with rook takes e3 there. It's all coming up a little short. I don't think bishop e4 works in that case. Could play f4 to give the pawn back, but that somehow doesn't seem quite right. d4, there's also the question about bishop g5. Maybe white just bypasses this whole thing. But then D4, bishop G5, maybe rook E8. Maybe. hmm. Rook F1. Interesting move. Very interesting. It's making me think, that's for sure. I haven't really found a great way to proceed against this. And there's F4, rook Fe8, the D4 move. Taking on G4, but I think I'm moving away from taking on G4. Just despite that looking obvious, I'm not seeing much there. Bishop G3, bishop G5. I feel like I'm missing something in that line, which is why it's hard to tear myself away. I do feel like something is missing there. But I'm not seeing it. I don't know. D4, bishop G5. F6 and then play F4 maybe? That looks interesting. Okay. I'm going to go D4. This is a dynamic decision. I didn't spend as much time calculating D4 as I did H takes G4, but it looks very interesting to me, and it kind of feels like I should play dynamically, given that white is playing the position down a pawn, but with some intermediate moves. I feel like I need to do something dynamic in reply, if that makes sense. So if bishop takes, I want to play F4. I want to establish this pawn in the center. Or on the flank, but protected pass pawn kind of near the center. And open lines. My d-pawn's isolated. I'm not seeing a whole lot of future for the d-pawn in these positions. Maybe that's one reason I'm going for it. Sharp stuff. Bishop takes d4, bishop g5, both candidate moves here. I'm thinking on bishop g5, I might play f6. Get white to take, but then play f4. Then play the f4 move. And I don't know. I don't know who's better there. It's sharp. I had to play something, though. I was starting to use too much time. I still don't feel like I'm worse here. I think white faces some difficult decisions, but it's dynamic. This could really go either way. White's favor, black's favor could just be equal. Play the position in front of you. You can kind of sense, though, I'm continually trying to set my opponent problems. I'm trying to choose ways, lines of play that give them multiple options, all of which are, in my opinion, unclear to evaluate. So I know that Happy Mode is having just as many problems as myself in wading through this. At least I hope. I think bishop takes d4 will be Happy Mode's decision. I would kind of doubt they play bishop g5 for some reason, because it looks a little slow, but maybe. So on bishop takes d4, I'm going to play f4 real quick. Maybe I could even take on g4, but I'm going to stick with my f4 move. We can't mess around. Yeah, there's also queen g5 on deck, so I think I should definitely play f4. And on bishop g5, I think I'm going to play that f6 move. f6, bishop takes f4, and bishop takes h4, and then f4. So either way, I'm trying to get the pawn to f4 to block white's f-pawn play and get a protected pass pawn, something that in the endgame I know is going to be useful. This does restrict my own bishop, though, in this direction towards the king side. Pawn on d4, I'm also not thrilled about. I wasn't thrilled about it on d5 either. Yeah, white does take. Okay, let's go f4 as planned. And very quickly plays g5. So f4 was not a surprise to happy mode. Makes sense. Now, is g6 a threat? Doesn't seem so. Doesn't seem so, but I should be aware of it. So rook e8 is my instinct here. Just get that open file. Yeah, being able to play bishop f8 is kind of handy in some cases too. White's bishop is undefended on d4, but I'm not saying how I can exploit that. Yeah, let's play rook e8. Trying to maintain a slim time edge if I can. If I'm able. So get this rook in the game. I think it was time. If bishop f2, trying to go after the h-pawn, maybe f3, trying to prop up rook e2. There's still this bishop b4 idea in the air. I might have a chance to unleash that, but we shall see. Wow, we're only on move 22. This feels like we're deeper into this game, but this has been tense. Very tense battle here today in the Lone Wolf. I love it. Okay, rook g1. Okay, bishop c5 could maybe make some sense, although then rook takes f4, huh? Then rook takes f4. Do I play g6, even though it gives that dark square bishop pretty decent reign? That might not be a bad idea, honestly. It's a pretty sturdy move. I don't know if I want to have to assess the consequences of my opponent playing g6. There's an idea of queen f2, though, I should be aware of. Queen f2. Is that really a threat, though? Because c2 is loose. By that, I mean queen takes h4. Is queen takes h4 a threat? Hard to say. Bishop e5. Bishop e5 can't be right this early. Trade, I lose f4. Maybe rook e6? Rook e6 actually might make sense. Helps guard g6. Yeah, that might be a sturdier move as well. Possible doubling. Yeah, I think I like this. Let's play it. Need to keep the moves coming pretty quickly here. G6 was my instinct, but I don't think I should weaken that diagonal quite yet if I don't have to. So this is another way to address G6, be able to take the pawn. Sharp position. I could double, but again, I kind of want to keep my rook on the C file. I don't know if I want to remove the pressure from C2, but hey, rook E2 could be compelling. So I'm going to keep an open mind about it. Queen H2, can I play F3? Would that make sense? Queen takes C2, king B1. Oof, messy. Messy position there. Maybe I wouldn't mind a queen trade. I said in the endgame, sometimes this H-pawn could be handy. Still, it feels like there's a bit of a standoff going on still. But we're both getting jittery with the time situation. I know my heart is beating. Okay, happy mode getting pretty low here. So again, I'm still looking to pounce with some dynamic decision if I can, but I got to weigh the defense of my own king too. That's no picnic.
I mean, there's some cases where could make sense for white to give up c2 with their queen coming over and maybe taking a pawn, but it looks dangerous. It looks very dangerous. White does play queen f2. So f3 was an idea I had here. And it might have some shock value. So f3, queen takes c2, king a1. There's no mate that I see. And I got to watch f7. So I could play rook f8 at that point. But I'm not confident that I'm better on that open board. Maybe I should play something like b6, but that might give away the initiative too. Could play rook e8, but I don't know. Queen takes h4, rook e2. Pawn sack for me. So I was saying there's still like a standoff going on. 3 though, I don't think I'd rather keep the f pawn than the h pawn, I think. Okay, I think I'm going to double the rooks. Queen e7 is another option too, by the way. No, but that too allows queen takes h4. Now I'm under a minute. Yeah, I'm going to double the rooks. It usually pays to coordinate in time pressure. So let's do it. Double the rooks. Rook e2. Queen takes h4, rook e2. Let's say rook c1. Then my f pawn is kind of loose. Like I could, in a good way maybe, I could push it. Gotta be mindful of g6 though. g6 is a thing. Maybe white's even thinking about playing it here, g6. But they don't have much time now. I feel the dilemma, happy mode. This is sharp. Queen takes h4. Yeah, let's go rook e2 as planned. And I think rook c1 will be played. Oh, maybe not though. Could they play g6? Ooh, that's sharp. I don't know. g6 is a gutsy move, but maybe they can even give up c2. I could play pawn takes g6 first, though. Oof. Sharp, sharp stuff here, guys. It's a lot to calculate with little time. Plays c3. Ooh, but c3 gives me access to b2. That I'm happy to see. But can I punish it? I don't know. Rook takes b2, rook e2. Ooh, wait a second. Rook takes b2, king takes b2, rook e2 check, queen a5? Ooh, hold up. That's going to be hard for white to defend. That is going to be hard for white to defend. There's no threats around my king yet. Rook takes b2, rook e2, queen a5. Because all their pieces are on the queen side, or king side, rather. And this is going to have shock value for sure. This is the type of move that could win me a chess game. And I actually don't see a defense for white. Because queen a5, I attack a2 right when that happens. I think it's time to pounce. This is what I was talking about. All right, we're going to find out if this works or not. White pretty much has to take. So queen a5 is coming next, pretty much regardless of what white does. Even if they try to run towards my rook. So king c1, queen a5, king d1. I play queen takes a2, connect with the rook. And then I'm threatening checkmate. And this is only possible because my king is just safe enough here, I think. Ooh, if this works, I'm going to be feeling fortunate because I feel like the play on the king side was right there for white. A move or two away, but c3 weakened that second rank. I'm tempted to pre-move queen a5 here, but I think that would be foolish. I think I should wait a second. But how does white defend? Because when the queen links up with the rook, I don't see a defense for white. So queen a5, bishop a3 is also possible, but that doesn't do anything. Oh, wait a second. White does have g6 maybe. Ooh. Let's play this. I gotta play it. Oh, is white getting there faster? Oh my. Have rook a2 maybe? Oh man, I might have miscalculated. There's bishop takes g7 as well. No, but then I take probably. Rook e1? Oh, I might have miscalculated here. I thought I was getting everything with check. I think I did miscalculate. Hold up. This is still tricky. Very tricky. Wait a second. Rook c2, queen takes a2. It's white snaking out there. Huh. Now I'm under time pressure. Rook e8 is a thing. Queen a3, king d1. Rook d2, check. King d1, check. They're running. Hold on. Ay. Am I crashing and burning here? There's e2 as well. I'm running out of time, though. Gonna have to do something soon. I'm gonna go check. I'm gonna buy some time. That might be the wrong check, though. I don't know. I was thinking rook takes a2 here, but rook takes a2. They're going to have... Oh, my... Okay. Rook e8, bishop f8, rook takes f8. I actually can take with my queen. I don't know how much that helps, though. I don't know how much that helps. We're going to find out. So white has g6 at the end. Ugh, I might be losing, guys. I think I might be. I think I'm losing. Happy mode. Whew. Maybe it's still sharp, actually. But there's g6 at the end. I think white has to play rook takes f8 now. It's unfortunate that I was happy about queen takes initially, but now I think g6 is a problem. If I take with the king, I feel like I'm just going to get mated. Queen h8, king e7, rook e1. Yeah, I'm not going to survive that. I got to take with the queen. So is g6 a killer here? That's the key question. It kind of looks like it. Because on check, the rook is defended. Also, white's threatening mate. So I think on g6, I got to take my chances with pawn takes g6, rook takes g6, rook a1 check. But my checks eventually run out, I think. Yeah. I think the checks run out. I got to take, right? There's probably no choice. Probably no choice here. Rook a1 just doesn't do much. Okay, so let's take. Because rook takes g6, there's rook takes g7, and all that pressure towards my king. Ooh, I really thought I had happy mode with rook takes b2, but I think I miscalculated. I missed that on queen a1 check. I actually wasn't threatening the check towards the king. So rook e1 here, rook a1 rather, probably the only move. But I think white just now walks towards my rook. King c2, rook a2, king b1. And I'm not seeing how I hold that. I think that's busted. Got a little more time now, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to matter for me. Is there any chance of a perpetual net? King a2, rook a2 check, king b1, rook a1 check, king takes a1, queen a3, king b1 check, check. No, it seems like white can just eventually snake out. Yeah. And there's just no time for me. Rook takes g7 is always on the offing. That bishop on d4, too strong. So I think I got to try rook a1, rook a2, rook a1. Also rook c1. Shouldn't make a difference, though. Rook a2, king b1, rook a1, king takes a1, queen a3, king b1, queen b3, king c1, queen a3. Best case scenario, I think I pick up the d3 pawn and then I pick up the rook. So maybe that can happen. Let's try it. Not looking good here, though, folks. Wow, I really thought I had happy mode with rook takes b2, but I think that shows my calculation is perhaps a bit rusty at times. I thought I had white dead to rights. So I'm in what I think is a lost position, but I'm looking for any swindling chance, and I should continue playing fast, I think, to try to make that happen. Maybe there's no way happy mode can prevent me from eventually playing queen takes d3. Now, I think that resulting position is definitely still lost, but oh yeah, it's definitely still lost. But I think I got to try rook a1 check. Let's go for it. Nothing else to do. This is too strong. Rook takes g7. Because even if I brought my queen in, let's say, guys, rook takes g7 followed by queen h8 is mate. It's too easy. Same reason I didn't play king takes f8 in that other line. Yeah, I'm seeing a line where happy mode can actually... Oh, no, they can't force a queen trade. But... Okay, keep checking. I can probably almost pre-move queen a3 here, but I'll wait. Just in case king a1, queen d1 makes any sense. So yeah, my only saving grace here is I'm thinking if I can, with a series of checks, eventually go win that white pawn on d3. But actually, now that I look at it, I'm not even on the right track for it. Maybe. King d1, I check from b3, perhaps. Goes king d2. Yeah, just going to hide over there, I guess. Is there any way I could get in queen e8 check? Not that I see. Yeah, I think the king is just going to hide on the king side. And I lose. Just Just looking for any triangulation pattern, but really not seeing it. If I could check from A4 and get Queen E8 in, that would be phenomenal, but that defies the physics of chess pieces. So I'm not seeing it. All right, let's check from B2. No skewer of the king and queen possible here. Check from B1 or C1. Does not matter much, I don't think. Yeah, because white's going to walk this way and then eventually block somehow. There's no way to get a skewer, I don't think. Still looking, though. Still searching. If I go queen B1, king E2, there's at least queen check. But queen B1, king F2, there's nothing, is there? Yeah, I don't think so. Let's try queen B1. Might give me some outside chance. But king F2 is just way too easy now. Hmm. Yeah, I really thought rook takes B2 was winning. It felt winning in the moment, but that tempo white gains by attacking my loose rook is what I missed. So I got sloppy in the moment. I mean, it's understandable we had little time left. So that's on me. But yeah, I got sloppy. And now happy mode's just using some time, probably making sure that king F2, king G1 works. Yeah, I'll probably resign when white finds the king H2, rook G2 thing. They probably already found it, but we're just double checking. Zero chance for a stalemate here. King D2, really? Wait, why? Maybe just repeat? Repeat, gain some time? I mean, I'd be very happy with a repetition. So I'm going to play this super quick. But king F2 is just winning. As far as I can tell, yeah. There's nothing. But the fact that happy mode played that is giving me pause at least, like, hey, am I missing something here? But I don't think so. Yeah, queen C2. Let's play queen C2. I mean, if king F3, queen takes D3, and then queen takes G6, game on. I have some outside chances to hold there, but king G1, king H2 is pretty lights out because the thing about king G1, if white stays on the dark squares, I can't ever fork them. Fork the king and the rook. That's the issue I'm facing here. Yep. Finds it. Any other swindling chances? Queen D1, king H2. Because the rook just always blocks. Also, the queen or the bishop can block too. We'll play queen D1. But might be resigns time here in a second, guys. Might be resigns time. Play one more queen check. Just in the off chance white repeats. But either of these moves will clean up. No problem. Well, I'm curious if rook takes b2 worked. We're going to find out. Yeah, I think time to resign here. No tricks left. White's king is safe. Tell my opponent GG. Yeah, that was good defense. I mean, some of those moves were forced for white, but it was nerve-wracking. I think we both had to make some very tough decisions in time pressure. So my first loss of the league. Ooh. Yeah, tough. Let me think about that position I had for a second, because yeah, I think I underestimated king c1 and the geometry involved, because when I play queen a5, the thing that I missed is that queen a3, king d1 always slows me down. For some reason, I don't know if I thought I had queen a4 check there or something, but I thought I was mating right away. Maybe I thought my queen was landing on a4 immediately in my head. I don't know, because king c1 is probably the only move. I think on everything else I win, right? So like if king a1, queen a5, and white's pieces are all too far away from the king. Yeah, rook e1 is really nice too. I mean, maybe there's other moves like rook f2 might work. Do I have anything on rook e1? What did I play? Queen a3 check. Could I change the move order somehow? There's also, I was thinking one of the captures on a2. Does maybe queen takes a2 actually give me chances? Queen takes a2 with the idea of rook takes e2, queen takes e2 simply? Could there be a universe where that works? Then probably queen f2 and a bishop a3, king b1. And I think white defends. Yeah, this might not work. I mean, maybe there is something here. Is there rook c2? This is what I was trying to calculate. It just always seemed like white was slipping away. Like I was missing some key check somewhere. So even now, it's hard for me to calculate. And then I was very happy to see that I have queen takes f8 at the end. But it actually doesn't matter, as it turns out, because f6 is so crushing, as far as I can tell. Don't think it matters if I throw this in, because even if I check and go take the rook, white ignores it and mates me. So, yeah, I feel in some ways that this was unlucky for me that this didn't work out, but is it really unlucky? You know, we use that term in chess, but we should always take that with a grain of salt, because this might just not work at all for me. But I'm still not seeing, yeah, how I could have done better here. Like f3 somewhere, but in the most brutal case, queen a3 check, king d1, queen a4, let's say, king takes e2, queen c2 check. White has both f1 and f3 available. I could take the d3 pawn, but that's not going to work out. I'm down far too many pieces there. Sacrifice both rooks. So I feel good in the sense that I think after I decided to play rook takes b2, I don't see what else I could have done. And I think white just defended really well. And actually, maybe it's the case that g6 is even possible right here. That might be the case too, because maybe rook e1 is actually unnecessary. Because I'm not threatening a mate in 2 or something. Yeah, I think that's the case, actually. I think white could play g6. So if that's the case, rook takes b2 is wrong. What else could I play in this position? Arguably, the position's not good for me then, because g6 is coming pretty quickly, and I can't play g6 myself because of mate on h8. Because of queen h8 checkmate. So I'm not seeing a great move for me in this exact position. I didn't really think c3 would be played, because it looked weakening. I didn't think white would want to weaken the second rank like that. Maybe c4 is even playable too, by the way, to keep the bishop poised in the defense. And now I'm thinking, could I have switched up the move order? Maybe played queen a5 first? I don't know, though. It gives white a chance to even play c4 again. So we'll look at the engine, see what some of these tactics were like. Things exploded pretty quickly. I do think there's a decent chance the engine's going to say d4 is the move here, and just agree to this bishop takes d4, bishop takes f4, bishop e3 trade scenario. I was allergic to that in the game, but maybe without justification. I'm curious about this f5 takes rook h1, rook f1 operation too. That was really interesting. And I was skeptical of it at first because I thought f takes g4, h takes g4, bishop g3. But then I started noticing bishop g5, bishop f4 perhaps even. I see what white is going for there. But that surprised me for sure. I thought on f5, white was just going to take, and I was going to be able to play rook e8, and then the g file's open, but I've got significant activity down the e file. So somehow with this, it made some room for white, and the tension was actually pretty interesting there. So yeah, very, very difficult game. Some tough decisions from what was initially a fairly calm opening, this kingside fianchetto. Even though I didn't prepare in depth for this game, I don't feel like the lack of prep, or going light on the prep rather, had anything to do with the result. I think this was a tense game where I lost in some complications that were really looking like I thought right towards the end, I thought I was winning. But my rook being on a unfavorable square is what does me in here. Maybe the engine will say there's something, though. I'm still looking at this with my human eyes before I turn on the engine because I'm really, really curious. But also, having looked at this after the fact, I'm just not seeing anything better. I'm seeing escapes for white all over the place. Not all over the place, but in all these lines. There's always one avenue, maybe two avenues available for white. So it probably is the case that this is coming up short. And like I said, maybe white can even play g6 right here. Yeah, because I'm just not connecting with my rook in time. And the rook being vulnerable on king d1 is what kills me. I need to check. But then after king d1, I lose time because that rook is loose. And I can't spare the tempo towards my king. So is there anything I could do differently around here? Queen f2. All this stuff made sense. Or it seemed like it. Queen takes h4. This position is definitely critical. Maybe rook g6, but rook g6 feels defensive. If that's how I have to block g6, doesn't quite feel right. And I am down a pawn at this point. So, I don't know. Let's click into the analysis. Boy, my classical rating got torched this game, didn't it? Minus 76 classical. Oh, yeah. C3 was a blunder. It's hard not to look at this when you play a sharp game, like to look at the analysis right away. C3 was a blunder, but not the way I played it. Bishop e5 was the move. That's tough. Bishop e5 is minus 2.5. Wow. Wow. Bishop e5. Not what I would have expected. I mean, that move crossed my mind in various forms, but not here. Why is that so good? Oh, is it because of bishop takes e5, then queen b6? Is that the reason why? Yes. Wow, look at that. And then if c4 to defend, we take and renew the threat. And I guess that's how white is too weak. I actually don't have to sacrifice a rook. Interesting. Wow, so c3 was a mistake. Rook c1 is the best move, in which case it's equal. But I didn't find this removal of the defender. In my defense, that's a tough move. Although it also says rook 8 takes e5 is good here too. So getting rid of the bishop was key. That bishop on d4, who knew? All along. Yeah. And this just isn't working. Rook e1, nice find. What if g6? Does g6 allow a draw? So this case I can draw with this move only, huh? Here, queen d5. Oh, and if king up, is there f5? No, just queen e6. Wow. And if white continues marching in, queen f5 or take. Queen f5. Oh, wow, because look at this checkmate if this happens. That's hilarious. The king wedged in here. So white would have to go here and then take. And I guess this is a perpetual. That's pretty funny. Yeah, so c3 was a blunder, but I didn't find the right way to punish it. I wonder if I could have found that with more time. I doubt it. I think I would need a significant amount of time here to find that, because this queen b6 move is so unexpected. Then again, rook 8 takes e5. I can kind of see how this works. There's still the g6 question. But I guess now rook takes b2 works. Because there's c3 pressure at the end. Wow. Yeah, like this. And then king c1 runs into queen takes c3 check. And any other king move, I always have a check with the queen. Like king a1, this is checkmate. King b1, queen b6, queen b2. So what I'm putting together here is actually, I had the right thread of how this should go down. But I was missing a key ingredient in that I got to get rid of that bishop. I mean, it's probably generous to say I had the right thread. The pressure against b2 is significant here. And I was correct to be skeptical about g6, but clearly I pulled the trigger on this too fast, after which white is winning. Yeah, just nothing to be done. Maybe queen takes a2 was a better chance. This probably gives me more chances with bishop a3. Yeah, queen f2. I probably should have played this way, because this at least forces white to find this. Maybe I can take d3. Okay, there's some very, very outside chances I can survive this. Yep. But this is well played. Yep, g6 is killer. Not the only move. I guess rook e1 also wins. Nothing to do after this. Yeah. Just dying checks. Dying checks. I was surprised that white repeated, but there's no harm in doing so. Just gain some time. Make sure you have enough for the calculations there. And then it's resigns time. Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it looks like it was pretty even. Small edge white, small edge black. Nothing more than about half a pawn. Looks like it was pretty even up until that moment. So, pretty fascinating. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add explanation-wise to the opening. So we'll just quickly browse through. This was an intense game. So we'll quickly browse through and just see big picture. I'm pretty sure I've seen stuff like h5 played. Yeah, there's one master game where this was played. If not h5 in this exact position, I've seen it in similar positions when you trade. Looks like the computer very slightly prefers bishop h5. But bishop takes f3 felt pretty good too. Yeah, e4. I mean, e4 surprised me, but seems okay. Yep, bishop d6. I was explaining how I liked all these decisions for flexibility purposes. I think I found a good setup. Good way to develop. Knight f6. Come to d5. Yeah. Maybe doesn't like that one so much. Just a5. Not a move I thought about, but getting the party started on the queen side. I guess that portends castling short. a5 looking to castle short. Kind of a tough move, though. I think the inclination here is to not make too many committal decisions until later.
I don't know. I felt like I was playing standard, good, understandable moves. F4. Yeah, I was skeptical about this, but the computer said, no, this is totally fine for white. Still gives a slight edge. Rook C8, okay move. Castle's also fine. What about D4? D4, bishop takes F4. Okay. Yeah, this doesn't move the needle much. Still a tiny, tiny edge for white. Plus 0.1, plus 0.2. I wanted to keep those bishops on and just give white more to think about. But this does ultimately look fairly level. But I can see how the computer very, very, very slightly prefers white. It does seem like white's C and D pawns could be more relevant than my F and E pawns, although both sides pushing those pawns entail weakening their king. Maybe it's pricing in the fact that my H pawn is loose. I don't know. That could feed into that. But it's basically level. Basically level there. Yeah, D4 still a suggestion, but I castled. So if F5, which was played, takes, G takes. Okay, rook df1 is a suggested move, but G takes F5 is the top move. So I was thinking rook Fe8. Just kind of curious how this might go. And if F6, I'd probably play G6. Bishop E5. Bishop E5 and try to take. Interesting. G6 also looks logical, though. I just have to make sure there's no universe where the queen can land on H6 and mate me on G7, because I want to have bishop F8 available. So it looks like this would have given me decent counterplay. But it's a fight. It's still hard to assess. Something like F6 or plug the G file. F6, I think, makes sense. I've got the pressure here and here. It looks scary for white to allow rook takes E3, queen takes C2, but I don't think there's anything after that. I was looking at this idea and all these lines to see if I could get a back rank checkmate or pivot towards attacking B2, but it never seems like it can work. So rook df1, d4. Yeah, so that is the top move according to the engine. I used a lot of time here, probably too much. I went from 812 down to 317. So this is time that could have helped me later, but I made the right call. Is this take? Yeah, this line isn't so great for black. Bishop g5. This is what I couldn't solve. Just wasn't sure about queen takes h or bishop takes h4 in that position. So yeah, take f4. Okay. The other thing is I was wondering about bishop g5. That's slightly better for black. Rook fe8. And I was thinking about f6. Yeah, okay. Slightly better for black. So bishop takes d4, f4. We still haven't strayed much from equality. Rook fe8, rook hg1, rook e6, yeah. Queen f2. And now we're both very low on the clock. Getting to crunch time. I was very uncertain what to play here. I had a time edge, 2 minutes to 1 minute. So not much for either side, but I did have a time edge here. But I wasn't sure what to do. It crossed my mind to play a waiting move like b6. Just reckoning that queen takes h4 runs into queen takes c2. But it didn't feel quite fast enough, you know? But it's hard because both sides are judging whether they need to play fast enough or whether they can play these waiting moves, because we're both keeping each other in limbo with the various threats. So maybe this was a mistake. Engine seems to think so very slightly, but it actually set me up with a winning position. Yeah, I thought white was going to play rook c1 here to guard c2. I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have played bishop e5, if I'm being honest. But the computer doesn't like that. Why doesn't it like it? Take with the queen to defend this. And now rook g to f1 and go after the f pawn, which I can't defend, I guess. And white is suddenly super solid on the queen side. Looks like they've castled short, but on the queen side, if that makes sense. Yeah, this was just a lot to work out in time pressure. A lot to work out. So White makes the first big blunder of the game, but I immediately blundered back, and probably in a bigger way. Because, well, definitely in a bigger way. Well, arguable. On a human level, I think I definitely blundered in a bigger way because after rook takes b2, White's defense is forced. Yeah. And I don't know why I thought I was winning. I think I got caught up in the moment, the euphoria of thinking I was going to get there first. But I'm not. Rook e1, rook f2. I'm not getting there first. That attack on the rook slows me down, like I was describing. So, like, imagine the rook was on h2. I would be winning here with queen a4 check, followed by queen c2, but it's clearly not the case. Yeah. Very interesting. Bishop e5. So that's a theme. That is a theme. And what happens if g6? Probably on g6, I just take the pawn, huh? Yeah, take. And all the same themes still exist. So if bishop takes e5, queen b6. That's amazing. You ignore the bishop and you play for checkmate. It's all about getting the queen here, but not yet sacrificing a rook. And then if something like b3, I think I ignore it again and I play queen a6. Yeah. Especially queen takes a2. And white could struggle, you know, move all their pawns, but we're going to load up for checkmate soon. Ooh, it hurts because, like I said, I was, I feel like a shark smelling blood, but I ended up biting the wrong part of the animal, the wrong part of my prey in response. I went for the kill right away, but the kill wasn't quite there yet. I needed one more preparatory move. But I got to give myself a little grace. Like this is very difficult to find. Takes and queen b6. And I also have to give Happy Mode full credit for their defense, because even though, you know, king c1 is the only move, they still had to find some difficult moves like rook e1. You know, there's still a chance g6 might look more appealing. White had very little time here, right? When they played king c1, they had, what, 9 seconds? So they used all their time and got the 30-second bonus. So white's panicking too. I mean, look at this from the white side. This looks scary. At a glance, you might just assume you're lost. But rook e1 contests the rook, and the counterattack later is what really does me in. Yeah, so originally when I did this, I don't think I saw that my queen was connected to my bishop, so I was going to roll the dice with this. But then when I got here, I saw, especially with rook e1 coming, yeah, this move's killer. Because I get forced into the crosshairs somehow with the queen coming over for check. So that's not going to cut it. So I pretty much had to take with the rook, but g6 was lights out. And this pressure on g7, all I could do was check and give up the rook, like you guys saw. A nice little dance with the king. So, yeah, we could go in more detail into some of these decisions, but looking at it with the engine now, I think the engine validates a lot of what I thought and saw during the game, and probably, I can't speak for Happy Mode, but probably what Happy Mode was thinking about too. But that decision after c3 and the sharpness of the position, I didn't find bishop e5, clearly. Thought about removing that bishop. Maybe it comes back to d4, passing up d4 and bishop takes f4. But I wasn't up to snuff here. And I think that would have been, again, in my defense, that would have been very difficult to find. Maybe I could have found this line where I say to myself, okay, it's fine that you've traded the bishops, but your attack's going to get there with queen b6. And actually, I think rook takes b2. Was that the thing? Yeah, rook takes b2 was the winning idea. And then the rook e2 coming in, depending upon how white takes. That's hard, though. I mean, it's hard to see. This is very tit for tat. It's very bang, bang. One move makes all the difference in these sequences. So with this amount of time for both of us, I think it's not shocking that it turned out the way it did. And I made one big misjudgment, which was that I thought I had the attack progressing one move further than it was. Even again, looking at it, it still looks scary for white. even knowing the evaluation, but concretely, it just doesn't work. So, yeah, well played, Happy Mode. I would love to hear your thoughts if you want to pop in the comments. So, really interesting game. And I'll have to think about this moment more and how I can improve in these practical situations. Probably going to come down to time. You know, the clock is the major piece that people forget about in a chess game. And I didn't have a lot of time here to consider. But I also don't want to extrapolate too much because I think this could have gone either way for sure. Not to use a cliche, but you guys see the eval, you see how this game, very tense game, chances for both sides. I felt like I was pressing for a lot of it in the middle game, very slightly, but I felt like I had pressure. And rook takes b2 wasn't the way to capitalize. Okay, thank you guys. I'm going to wrap it here. So I'm on 3 out of 4. We'll see what week 5 brings. Happy Mode is going to be in first place or tied for first place, maybe with 1 or 2 more players. Congratulations to Happy Mode, my first defeat in the Lone Wolf League. Shed a tear for my 79 classical rating points on Lead Chess, or 76. But very well deserved by Happy Mode. Thanks again for the game. And thanks everyone for watching. Let me know what you think. And yeah, leave a comment. Tell me how you're liking the competition in the league too, because some of you guys thought I was going to go out 11 out of 11, but clearly that's not the case. All right, guys, take care. Have a good one.